All right, everyone, welcome back. We have two more presentations. These are going to be more of like a deep dive, kind of technical presentations. First up is Vince Leone, again from Miller Kaplan. He was on the first panel today, partner there and head of royalties. So Vince is going to be doing a deep dive into gaming the market, the anatomy of a gaming deal, which is not a topic that we've touched on yet, but definitely something that business managers are dealing with. So I think that being said, Vince, I will turn it over to you. Presentation looks good, so you're good to go.
All right, thanks, Matt. So as Matt said, I'm Vince Leone. I'm a partner at the accounting firm Miller Kaplan. And for the next half hour or so, I'm going to try to help you understand the interactive gaming market and the economics to a royalty recipient, so you can better help your clients share in a larger part of the nearly $300 billion brand licensing pie. So here at Miller Kaplan, we perform a number of royalty audits and consulting engagements each year. And each one seems to expose a different interpretation of the negotiated terms and what types of costs are deductible and how marketing ad funds should be spent. So each one is unique on its own, and each project offers a set of different challenges. Licensing. There are dozens of examples of celebrities, artists, actors, musicians sharing their likeness in with cameo appearances in video games, and in some of the largest franchises ever: Grand Theft Auto, Guitar Hero, and Call of Duty. There's two recent releases featuring talent: Cyberpunk 2077 featuring Keanu Reeves, and Death Stranding featuring Norman Reedus. Both of these were released in console and PC platforms. And so the question is whether you believe the actors legitimize these franchises or gaming needs no legitimization is the debate that can be had. We're not going to figure that out today, but that is a question. So what the most important thing today is, if you create or have an opportunity for a client to exploit this space, that you gain a better understanding on how it operates. So we're going to talk about the global video game market, talk about the different platform models, on how they're exploited and how royalties are calculated for your clients. We'll talk about key contractual terms, first the financial terms, and then other terms in the agreement that are extremely important to maximize the financial benefit to your client. And there is a chat button, I believe, that you can click and submit questions, and you know, time permits, we'll answer those at the end of this presentation. So according to Visual Capitalist, the worldwide gaming market grew 8% in 2020 to $165 billion. Mobile game comprises nearly half of this, with double-digit increase from 2019. Consoles also, the console platform also experienced growth, and the PC platform is basically flat. But that kind of 8% increase is pretty significant. And although I haven't seen any data for this year, I would imagine that it will continue to increase given the consumption of video games and the lack of other opportunities. So the market is spread pretty evenly across the globe, with the United States, China, Europe and the Middle East, and Asia Pacific, each contributing about 25% to total market share. So unlike other types of entertainment, this is consumed fairly evenly across the globe, and with areas like Latin America and Canada contributing as well. So with respect to give you some perspective on this, in 2019, the gaming revenue was $152 billion. And compare that to global box office revenue of about 43 billion and global recorded music at 20 billion. Means that gaming exceeds global box office by 3.5 times and nearly 8 times of global recorded music. So my assumption is most of the folks on this webinar have a number of clients that contribute to the global box office market as well as the global recorded music market, and just by contrast, how much bigger the gaming market is. So there is opportunity out there for your clients to benefit from the size and the growth. So again, the chat button is out there. If you have any questions, please submit them, and we can address them. So in the gaming market, there's basically 3 types of platforms. There's the mobile platform that we talked about already, console and PC. And each has a unique method of distribution to the consumer. Console and PC are fairly similar, but mobile is very, very different. There's three basic types of distribution for mobile gaming. There's the premium model, freemium model, and there's a subscription model. The premium model is you basically download the game for a fee from a digital service provider, as an example from Apple, and you get to play the game as long as you please based on that purchase. And some games have enhancements, downloadable content that's available for purchase to enhance the game playing experience. The price of each game ranges between like $1 and $20, and the downloadable content is as inexpensive as 50 cents and as high as $50. So it's not necessarily an inexpensive investment, especially if you have kids and you're buying a number of these. Now, with respect to the freemium model, it's downloaded for free, and you can play the basic game as long as you like for no cost at all. But these games have a lot of enhancements, and the types of, I should have mentioned this, the types of downloadable content will include could include avatars, additional maps to enhance the experience, and other things that will drive the experience to a different level. And so that with a freemium model, there's even more of those types of things because it is free to play, and the basic versions are after folks play them for a bit, they definitely are downloading additional content and challenging themselves. And the last form of distribution is the subscription model. So for a monthly fee, you get access to a curated catalog of games. There's no ads and there's no in-game purchases. So depending on depending on the game, it would be one of those forms of distribution. With respect to console and PC, there's very, very similar modes of distribution. Physical media, which is a disc or a cartridge, digital cards that are purchased from places like Walmart, Target, or GameStop that can be used to purchase games through the publishers. You can download these games from the publishers. These are either home or portable, and there is a subscription model as well for console, similar to the mobile platform, where you get access to a lot of games and no additional cost, and just pay a monthly fee. And similar downloadable content it exists in console as well to enhance the game playing experience. And should note, in each of these instances, the fee to purchase the game and the fee to download additional content, all of that revenue should be included in the calculation of royalties. So with respect to the PC, there's physical media and disc as well. talked about digital cards. You can download these games as well, and there is downloadable content. And for those of you that are nostalgic, there's still arcade games. I draw the comparison between arcade games and vinyl LPs. Both are growing exponentially, but make up such a small sliver of the market. There are restaurants and bars out there that feature these games, and depending on your age, Miss Pac-Man may resonate with you, or for someone like me, it could be a game called Foursquare, or Elton John themed Captain Fantastic. So the arcade games still do exist, and you probably have clients, maybe some of your seminal clients, your older rock and roll clients that had their own video games like Elton John, or I remember Queen had a game, as well as Kiss. So anyway, that's just something fun to talk about. So in addition to the distribution of these games, each has a different economic model in which the royalties are calculated to pay the royalty participant. Sorry about that. If that didn't happen on each presentation, then it wouldn't be any fun. So mobile game revenue is generated way differently than console or PCs. The mobile games, the receipts are generated from the digital service providers, and generally 70% of the revenue generated by the DSPs are turned over to the publisher, and that comprises the gross receipts for a royalty calculation. In most instances, there are no deductions from mobile gaming revenue to arrive at royalties, but it's also possible that hosting fees and third-party royalties, if they exist, are a deductible expense pursuant to the terms of the agreement, and then the contractual royalty rate is applied to those net receipts to arrive at the royalty due the participant. So just to back up one moment, it's the model, the economic model that I'm talking about, arriving at net sales, is something that's most prevalent in for a royalty participant. With respect to game developers, in many instances, those are net profit calculations, and that's a completely different discussion. So, and in addition, the negotiated royalty rate will vary depending on how net sales are calculated. My team did a royalty audit recently, and there were two separate games for the same client, and one required a royalty of 20% and the other required a royalty of 10%. And the difference was there were no deductions in the deal that lent a 10% royalty, whereas net sales were reduced by a number of things to arrive at the royalty base at the 20% royalty. And so with respect to consoles and PC, the PC platforms, the revenue that is generated on the sales to the retailer or the consumer. The price for these games ranges probably anywhere from $40 to $60 at retail, but your clients would be sharing in the wholesale price, which would be half of that. And then deductions can include platform fees for consoles, discounts, hosting fees, and price protection. And then the contractual royalty rate is applied to that base. It's most common that there are caps put on any sort of discounts that can be deducted from gross sales. The types of discounts are defined in the agreement. The types of discounts that can be deducted are defined, and those that can't be deducted. But in many instances, there's a cap on those deductions, given some volatility and in the industry, and the fact that the recipient wants to kind of guarantee a certain return on each sale. So With respect to PC sales, the sales of for the PC platform, again, it's the sales to the retailer or the consumer, and then the deductions can include cost of goods sold because there is a physical product involved, discounts, hosting fees, and price protection. So price protection, I mentioned that in consoles as well. Price protection is a mechanism by which a publisher will grant a retailer a discount retroactively. The retailer, let's say Walmart, purchases the product for $30 and they're trying to retail it for $60. Once that price point that they can sell to the retailer, they count up their inventory. They call the publisher and explain that they've got 10,000 pieces left in inventory and they need a credit per unit, and that's referred to in this industry as price protection. In other industries, it could be referred to as a chargeback. But price protection is a very, very real deduction in these agreements. Rebecca, can we go to the next slide? So we talked about the market and how these games are distributed based on platform and the economics of each. And I just wanted to talk about some key contractual terms, both financial as well as other terms that are extremely important in controlling these agreements and the amount of royalties that your client will receive. So folks ask me all the time, what does net sales mean? And every time, it depends on what the contract says. So these deals can define net sales as, net receipts, invoice price, net receipts with no discounts, net receipts less all those other deductions that we discussed in the previous slide. This is the most important term, along with the royalty rate that is negotiated, to be as clearly defined as possible. It's pretty much in each and every project we do, there's a bit of a disagreement in the net sales that were reported by the publisher versus what somebody on my team may determine is understated. So it's extremely important to negotiate the most beneficial net sales definition for your client and to make it as clear as possible. And one thing that gets overlooked is the ability for the licensee to account under the terms of that agreement. In some smaller publishers are not as sophisticated and may not have the systems in place to limit the amount of discounts that are deducted. And so in those instances, you have to go in and audit to make sure that the caps were not exceeded. The next clause I'd like to talk about is liquidated damages. So the liquidated damages clause basically defines the damage incurred in the case of a breach. The most common violation in the video gaming space that you can't quantify is meeting a ad or marketing spend. If a company is obligated to spend $100,000 a year in marketing for a particular game, and they come up $30,000 short of having a liquidated damages claim, we were $30,000 short and there's no remedy. But in the case of including a liquidated damages clause defining that if a marketing spend isn't met, the excess or the shortfall needs to be paid to the royalty participant. So there's numerous instances where we have that deductions may have been exceeded, and in those cases we can put a monetary claim on it. If product was distributed in a distribution channel that was not allowed pursuant to the agreement, there's really no recourse unless there's a liquidated damages clause that defines that damage, that puts a monetary amount on that damage. So with respect to the royalty rate, it's fairly common that it's a static royalty rate in this space. On occasion, we've run into situations where there is an escalated rate based on reaching certain sales levels, but generally it's a static rate, and the royalty rate needs to be negotiated in the same discussion as the net sales definition. The game publishers have margins that they need to meet, and insisting on a 20% royalty just pushes the discussion to, well, we need more deductions from net sales so we can meet our margins. Conversely, you can agree to, like in my previous example, agree to a 10% royalty, but a net sales definition with no deductions. So there's a number of ways to arrive at the royalty that you're going to receive for every sale. So most of these are sort of minimum guarantee, guaranteeing the royalty participant X number of dollars per year, incentivizing the publisher to maximize. They can exceed that guarantee and keep their margins where that are acceptable. It's important to negotiate. Guarantees are not crossable, and when I say not crossable, if there's a shortfall in year one, you get the entire minimum guarantee, and that shortfall does not carry over to year two. And so each year or each contract year or period should stand on its own. I mentioned the marketing and advertising clause earlier. In certain instances, depending on the situation, if it's a studio that is engaging in an agreement with the publisher for a character from a film, in certain instances, the publisher will kick in an additional 2% based on all the ad spend that studio is incurring to support the film. But in other instances, and probably in the circumstances with your clients, there should be a minimum spend supporting the game that your client is participating in. And those dollars that spend should be defined to specifically support the game. We've been in situations where a publisher has supported the minimum spend based on their marketing budget for the entire catalog, and the agreement stated that those dollars needed to be spent in support of that game specifically, as opposed to all of the Twitter ads that it was buying for all of the other games that they were distributing. So it's important to define those dollars would specifically support the IP that your client is participating in. So there's other terms that are extremely important depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your client. I've said this earlier, it's like any sort of exploitation has to be authentic to your client's brand. And so the term of the agreement is extremely important. You may want to limit the term to enable you to pivot in case the license isn't successful. In the case of a video game, that's not going to be necessarily applicable, because they'll sell, the publisher will distribute that game as long as they can, and even 10 years down the line, there may be some sort of a bundle or nostalgic distribution of that game. So in this particular industry, that the term is it's until they can't sell the game any longer. To define the marks that can be exploited by the game publisher, the images need to be approved and be part of the grant of license. It should limit the way that the publisher can exploit the name and likeness to your satisfaction, your legal team satisfaction, your client satisfaction, and limit it to just certain types of images and distribution. The agreements need to include a reporting requirement, setting forth the timing of when the royalties should be accounted. It should be noted that if your client is participating in a mobile game, that the publishers are receiving royalty statements every month from those DSPs. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it on a semi-annual basis. It really may not make sense to do it on a quarterly basis, that the publisher is required to account quarterly. But that also has to be weighed with the time it takes for a publisher to spend in order to get those accountings correct and sent to the participants. So it's a balancing act on when they're receiving that revenue and not to be too big of a burden on their accounting department. And because they should be spending as much time as they can supporting the exploitation of the intellectual property. So generally, it's to the royalty recipient or on a quarterly basis, anywhere from 30 to 45 days after the calendar quarter. It's important to define whether a publisher can sublicense a game. For the most part, the large publishers have the ability to distribute worldwide, but in certain instances, they may have to rely on a third party, specifically in places in Asia, in the Philippines, in China, where a game may have to be a mobile game specifically, cannot be distributed through traditional ways because the bandwidth in those places may not be sufficient to support those games. So they sublicense the rights, and many folks in those parts of the world are playing these games on flip phones because they just don't have the bandwidth to play that game on a better device. So the audit clause is always near and dear to my heart. This is the clause that allows Miller Kaplan to be hired to go and make sure that all the contractual terms have been met and that the royalties are accurate and they're complete. The audit clause generally has a limitation on the time period that can be audited, generally 2-3 years. And another, so you should be able to hire the auditor of your choice. And generally, you should try to maximize the audit period in which you're looking at. And you should try to negotiate into the clause, and it's fairly standard, that if a minimum threshold is met of findings, that the burden of the cost to do the audit is borne by the publisher. So for you folks that spend a lot of time in the music and in the film space, those clauses are generally not in recording agreements or participation agreements to push the cost of the audit to the record company or the studio. But generally, those agreements always have audit clauses. And one item that's not on this slide is interest. Again, not a lot of recording agreements or participation agreements require the record company or studio to pay interest on findings. But in the video game industry, it's commonplace that there is a penalty for late payments, and those would be either advances, minimum guarantees, or in my example, the quarterly royalties. So there's a interest obligation that can be asserted, as well as interest on findings. And so it's important that each of those are negotiated, are included, because one of the errors that folks make is only interest on findings is sometimes included in these agreements. So there's a little bit of a case study, a success story dating back to 2007 with the exploitation of the name and likeness. This has to do with Slash, the former, well, I guess current guitar player still for Guns N' Roses. 2007, I believe, the band had split up, but they licensed his image and put it on the cover of the game. In addition to putting his image on the cover of the game, they put it on the cover of the guitars that they were selling for Guitar Hero 3. So it had sales of over $830 billion. And it begged the question, was this a tipping point where gaming was legitimized? You had a rock and roll star like Slash lending his image and his avatar to the game. And was this the point in time where if folks like Slash were lending their name and likeness to a game, that this is a real business? And it's hard to believe now that it would ever be questioned. But to my point earlier, is a video game with the featuring Keanu Reeves, does that make that franchise legitimate because he's in it? I tend to side on the side of the video game industry that although I believe that talent enhances the brand, they've been doing things right for a long time and continue to grow. And they continue to grow in different ways, how the games are consumed, how it's the industry is kind of, Nintendo kind of runs the kids and family video game business, and Xbox and Sony cater to the gamers and more risky content. So in any event, it's an interesting concept, and I just thought I'd throw it out at the end of this presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince. I grew up playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and I just Googled, I was like, what year did that come out? That was 99. But even, they just re-released those two. So, I mean, some of these games are just crazy, crazy famous. And you really can't separate the celebrity from, especially that one and some of these other examples that you're talking about.
Well, that was groundbreaking, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think I actually listened to a podcast about where he talked about the royalties that he still receives off of these games that were released more than 20 years ago, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's tackle this one question. It's kind of a combined question, and then we'll start with the presentation for Chris. But so we have a question here about if you can kind of give a scope about what you're recovering in royalty audits, and I guess the costs associated with typical royalty audits. If you can maybe just flesh that out a little bit.
Sure. So some of the games that they were auditing are generating hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, it's really incredible the volume that goes on, and with a finding of 1% on a $100 million deal is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. But I mean, those are outliers in terms of size. We are generally able to assert a claim for fees in the audits we do, which means that our findings are exceeding, ranging from 3 to 5%. And the range of findings and settlements are from $100,000 to several million. The cost of the work varies greatly as well, depending on the size, the number of sales, the number of platforms, etc. And again, the cost could range between $25,000 to $1,000, depending on the complexity of the agreement. If it's a net profit deal, it could be even higher than that. But for the most part, we're doing work on behalf of studios and individuals that are sharing in the royalties of video games, and so generally that would be probably $25,000 to $50,000.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Rebecca just dropped in a couple links to check out a little bit more about Vince and the team at Miller Kaplan, some references. We'll send those out in an email afterwards too, if you don't jot them down now. So Vince, thank you very much. Thank you for all the work in the first panel, in this presentation, just pulling together this whole conference. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Vince. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
See ya. All right. And then on to the